The Switch 2 is here. The library is already stacked. These 15 games are the reason you own the hardware. Or the reason you're about to. Supergiant made Hades in 2020 and it won everything. Hades 2 had to follow that. It did. The first genuine contest for best roguelike ever made is now between a game and its sequel. Both from the same studio, both on the same console. You play Melino, sister of Zagreus, hunting the Titan Kronos who has escaped Tartarus and imprisoned Hades himself. The scope expansion is total. New characters, new biomes, new Arcana boon system that replaces the Olympian grid with a card-based upgrade layer, new elemental weapon families. The surface world above the underworld, the world of the living, is new territory for the franchise. And it's used to tell a story about grief, prophecy, and repetition that makes the original's emotional beats feel like a first draft. Metacritic, 95. Highest rated new game of 2025 on the platform. The community split between calling it better than the original and insisting the original's intimacy was irreplaceable. Both positions are defensible. The debate is proof that Supergiant made something worth arguing about. Hades 2 launched as a console exclusive on Switch and PC. It earned that launch. It earns the first slot. Team Cherry announced Silksong in February 2019. The wait lasted 6 years. When it finally arrived in 2025, the Metroidvania community processed it with the specific emotional complexity of something too anticipated to absorb immediately. Then the reviews came in, and the consensus formed. It was worth it. You play Hornet, the needle-wielding hunter from the original, rather than the knight. The movement grammar is completely different. Hornet is faster, more aggressive, more aerial. The ability progression is built around Silk rather than Soul, with a crafting system for tools and badges that gives the upgrade loop a tactical layer the original didn't have. The Kingdom of Farloom, built around music and infection, is visually distinct from Hallownest. A different palette, a different mythology, a different kind of decay. Metacritic, 91. Praised as setting a new gold standard for the genre. The Game Awards Best Action/Adventure winner for 2025. A free expansion, Sea of Sorrow, is confirmed for 2026. Hollow Knight. Silksong is not a sequel that makes the original feel smaller. It's a sequel that expands what the original made possible. Nintendo's first 3D Donkey Kong platformer in 26 years came from the team behind Super Mario Odyssey, and the design DNA shows. Same attention to movement feel, same density of secrets, same willingness to give a new mechanic enough space to fully develop before introducing the next one. The difference is Bananza's central hook, terrain deformation. DK smashes through everything. Rock layers reveal hidden passages. Punching down creates new routes. Tearing chunks of terrain to throw at enemies is both combat and exploration. The underground world structure, descending through geological strata, each layer with distinct biomes and physics properties, gives the platforming a vertical identity that no Nintendo game had articulated before. Pauline's singing abilities complement DK's brute force with resonance attacks that break specific materials. Metacritic, 91. Best-selling Switch 2, exclusive in the console's launch window at 4.25 million copies. The community called it the best 3D platformer Nintendo had released since Odyssey, with a significant contingent arguing it surpassed it. Donkey Kong Bananza is a first-year statement game. The Switch 2 needed one. It got it. Capcom has built their modern Resident Evil identity around a formula. First-person survival horror with over-the-shoulder action for the blockbuster entries, tight, intimate locations, and a protagonist dropped into a situation far beyond their preparation. Resident Evil Requiem fits this lineage and pushes it forward. A new protagonist, a new setting, and what critics described as the franchise's most technically impressive Switch release. The setup is familiar in the best sense. Isolated research facility, something wrong with the staff, inadequate ammunition, doors that require things you haven't found yet. The horror engineering is meticulous. Sound design carries more narrative weight than most games give it, and the environmental storytelling fills in what the sparse dialogue leaves open. The Switch 2 version runs at the full console target specifications. The Resident Evil franchise has produced consistent quality for nearly a decade through its modern era. Requiem continues that run without interruption. The community welcomed it as confirmation that the formula hadn't exhausted itself, that Capcom understood which levers to pull and which to leave alone. A new entry that respects what made the series matter without needing to repeat it.
Miss Ashcroft.
The Legend of Heroes. Trails in the Sky originally released in Japan in 2004.
She's my daughter.
The West received it in 2011. In 2025, Nihon Falcom rebuilt it from scratch using the Trails Through Daybreak engine. New visuals, new voice acting across the entire script, a choice between turn-based and real-time combat. And released it as Trails in the Sky First Chapter. A 21-year-old game became one of the best JRPGs of 2025. The story follows Estelle Bright and her adopted brother Joshua as bracers, a quasi-police guild handling quests from missing cats to political conspiracies, through the kingdom of Liberal. The conspiracy underneath the episodic quest structure takes chapters to reveal itself. The investment pays exponential returns. The Trails series is known for this. Long-form payoff built on granular character work. Metacritic, 90. Nintendo Life readers named it their Game of the Year 2025. The community that found the original on PSP treated the remake as the definitive argument for the franchise's quality. Trails in the Sky First Chapter is the correct starting point for the series. In 2025, it also became the best version of that starting point. The Game Kitchen, the studio behind Blasphemous, took the Ninja Gaiden franchise's 2D roots and made a new game in that tradition. Ragebound is not a remaster or a spin-off. It is a genuine entry in the lineage of the original NES trilogy, made by a studio that proved with Blasphemous that it understood how to handle demanding legacy action games with craft rather than nostalgia. You guide Kenji Mozu through a demon assault, with the assassin Kumori as a switchable companion. The two characters have distinct movesets, and the game designs encounters with both in mind. The difficulty is calibrated in the NES tradition, demanding pattern recognition, precise execution, with modern checkpointing that prevents the frustration ceiling of the originals without removing their core tension. Metacritic, 87, is widely praised as the best tribute the Ninja Gaiden franchise had received in 30 years. The speedrunning community adopted it immediately. The movesets are deep enough to reward optimization. The Game Kitchen added another entry to its catalog of games that defend genres the industry had largely abandoned. Ubisoft Massive built Star Wars Outlaws as the franchise's first open-world game. Not a galaxy-spanning map, but a collection of planets with genuine physical depth, traversable on foot, by speeder, and by ship. Kay Vess is a scoundrel, not a Jedi. The story runs through faction reputation systems. The Star Wars setting is used to tell a different kind of story within it. The reputation mechanic, 4 criminal syndicates whose trust rises and falls based on choices, with each faction controlling access to equipment, missions, and areas, creates genuine strategic tension. Playing both sides has consequences. Full commitment to one faction closes options with others. The design is structured around this web of obligations rather than a traditional open-world collectible grid. Note the Switch 2 version arrived as the definitive portable version of a game that rewarded tactile exploration. The community that founded on Switch 2 responded to the faction system and the physical detail of each planet's surface design with consistent enthusiasm, discovering a Star Wars game that had more to say about loyalty and survival than lightsabers and the Force.
Pick that lock, grab the identicard.
Xenoblade Chronicles X was released in 2015 for Wii U, a console that reached approximately 13 million people worldwide. The definitive edition on Switch 2 reached a substantially larger audience and gave it what the original lacked: a proper ending. The story of humanity's last survivors rebuilding civilization on the alien planet Mira was left unresolved in 2015. The new final chapter addresses what the Wii U version left open for 10 years. The planet of Mira remains one of the most ambitious open-world designs in JRPG history. 5 continents, radically different biomes, a traversal ecosystem that scales from on-foot exploration to scale mech combat to aerial operations. The field skills tied to party composition add a social dimension to exploration the series hadn't attempted before. Metacritic, 87. The community that played the Wii U original described it as a defining experience. The community that played the definitive edition described it with the same intensity, plus the satisfaction of an ending they'd waited 10 years to receive. This is what happens when excellent design finally gets the audience it deserved.
Vision would eventually be made for us.
The xenoforms found us again, and, well, it wasn't a...
Final Fantasy Tactics released in Japan in 1997. The political narrative, aristocratic conspiracy, religious corruption, a protagonist whose historical role is erased by the victors, was unlike anything in the franchise at the time. The tactical combat, built on the job system, remains one of the deepest turn-based frameworks ever designed. The Ivalice Chronicles compiles the PSP War of the Lions content, full voice acting, updated translation, and Switch 2 performance improvements alongside long-overdue accessibility options. The job system allows any unit to equip abilities from any mastered class, building combinations the game never explicitly teaches. Discovering that a ninja with time mage abilities and knight passive skills is an entirely different animal than either class alone. That's the texture of the system. In the story's fatalism, the way it argues that historical record belongs to the powerful remains pointed 28 years later. Metacritic, 87. The tactical JRPG community treated the Switch 2 release as the game's definitive form. Newcomers discovered why this had been recommended for 3 decades. Final Fantasy Tactics is one of those games that has never been surpassed in its specific category. The Ivalice Chronicles is its best version. Hello Games released No Man's Sky in 2016 to widespread disappointment and then spent 9 years adding everything the community asked for. The 2025 Switch 2 edition is not the 2016 game. It is the current version. Starship customization, base building, multiplayer, underwater biomes, living ships, settlement management, expedition events, and a narrative framework that contextualizes the procedural universe. The Switch 2 port runs at 1080p/40 frames per second, docked with options to prioritize resolution or frame rate. The procedural generation, every planet, star system, and creature unique, means the Switch 2 copy contains the same infinite universe as every other platform. Community events run on a shared cross-platform timeline. No Man's Sky has one of the most unusual redemption arcs in the medium. Hello Games never charged for any of the updates. 18 employees produced a decade of free content. The Switch 2 version is what that decade built. It is the game it was always supposed to be, finally on hardware that carries it portably without significant compromise. Marvelous built Rune Factory, Guardians of Azuma as the series' most structurally ambitious entry since Frontier. The farming, crafting, and relationship simulation that defines Rune Factory is intact. Seasonal crops, dungeon materials, marriageable characters with full story arcs. The setting shift to a fantasy Japan produces a game that feels distinct from its European-coded predecessors without losing the formula's core appeal. The ally battle system, bringing romance candidates and friends into dungeon combat as party members, is the deepest combat integration the series has attempted. Weapon crafting feeds directly into build strategy. The seasonal calendar structure gates certain story events behind progression, creating long-term planning across months of in-game time. Metacritic, 86. Nintendo Life readers placed it among their top 5 Switch 2 releases of 2025. The Rune Factory community described it as the series reaching its potential. Mouse mode compatibility on Switch 2 adds precision input for farming and crafting that feels naturally suited to the tactile economy of the game. The best Rune Factory entry since the 4th.
All right!
Capcom's first fighting collection gathered Street Fighter and Darkstalkers classics. The second went further. Power Stone 1 and 2. Capcom vs. SNK. Capcom vs. SNK 2. Street Fighter Alpha 3. And 5 additional titles, including Plasma Sword and Cannon Spike. The collection's headline entries are Power Stone, which had not received a proper home release since the Dreamcast, and Capcom vs. SNK 2, one of the most technically sophisticated 2D fighters ever made. Power Stone is the wild card, a 3D arena fighter where every object in the level is a weapon, where 3 Power Stones fuse your character into a super form, where chaos is the design principle. The community Nintendo built its 8-player local multiplayer infrastructure around has a flagship title in the Power Stone games. 4 players in a Power Stone 2 arena is exactly the chaos that functionality was designed for. Metacritic, 86. The fighting game community treated the Power Stone inclusions as the collection's reason for existing. Capcom vs. SNK 2 satisfied the competitive community's demand for a current hardware port of a game that had been emulator-only for years. Every included game justifies being included. That's a standard most compilations don't meet. Bandai Namco took Pac-Man's 45th anniversary as an opportunity to do something genuinely strange. Shadow Labyrinth is a dark science fiction Metroidvania where Pac-Man, here called Puck, compact and menacing, serves as your companion and weapon. You play Swordsman number 8, a voiceless mercenary navigating a dystopian planet embedded in Bandai Namco's unified arcade timeline. References to Xevious, Dig Dug, and Galaga run through the lore like geological strata. The Pac-Man integration is more than aesthetic. Rail systems run through the world like maze corridors. Puck attaches and traverses them in the original game's movement language. Traditional maze sections appear as discrete chambers, complete with dots and ghosts. The giant Gaia mech transformation, powered by consuming enemies wholesale, is the most overtly Pac-Man moment in a game that otherwise refuses to be what you expect. Mixed to positive reviews noted the gap between concept's ambition and execution's consistency. The combat is functional, the world design serviceable, the pacing occasionally loose. What Shadow Labyrinth gets right is atmosphere and audacity. It exists. For players willing to meet a flawed game on its terms, there is genuine strangeness here worth the price of admission. Metacritic, 76. Ad Hoc Studio staffed 30 people, nearly went bankrupt during development, and released Dispatch as an episodic narrative game. 8 episodes that became one of 2025's most discussed experiences. Aaron Paul, Jeffrey Wright, Laura Bailey, Telltale-style choice architecture, an animated aesthetic that could plausibly be an adult streaming series. A superhero team management system where dispatching the right character to the right crisis shapes everything. The writing is the reason the game sold 3 million copies within months. The characters feel designed rather than assembled. Their quirks, histories, failure modes, all of it serves the central question of what makes someone a hero when the systems around them don't. Robert Robertson's arc from washed-up Mecha Man to reluctant dispatcher to something more complicated is the kind of protagonist development the genre rarely manages. The Switch 2 version runs at 1440p/60 frames per second. A note for players. The port includes some content modifications relative to other platforms, which reviewers flagged as a minor but real issue. The story and writing are entirely intact. At 97% critic recommendation rate on OpenCritic, Dispatch earned its reputation on narrative merit alone. That reputation is justified.
Hey, hopefully it's nothing too scandalous.
I've been waiting a long time for this.
SFB Games built Crow Country over several years with a team of 2. It is a survival horror game set in an abandoned 1990s theme park, styled in low-polygon PS1 aesthetics, referencing early Resident Evil and Silent Hill, while remaining entirely its own thing. A park inspector named Mara Forrest arrives at Crow Country Amusement Park, long closed, owner missing, and discovers what was left behind. The survival horror fundamentals are executed with precision. Limited inventory, conserved ammunition, environmental puzzle locks, enemies that can be avoided or eliminated depending on resource calculus. The level design makes excellent use of the park setting. Each zone has its own thematic identity and mechanical language. The low polygon aesthetic is not a limitation. It is a decision that produces specific visual mood the game leverages entirely. The Switch 2 edition runs at stable performance with enhanced resolution. Crow Country is the kind of game that finds its audience slowly through word of mouth, through players who played it and immediately wanted someone else to play it too. SFB Games made it with 2 people and the accumulated knowledge of every great horror game that came before it. The result is a game that honors its references by understanding why they worked.